is we tend to forget about the responsibilities that we have been, and I would say blessed with. But there's a whole lot of places where I go in conversations and talk to people that have to do bed checks as unfortunate folks. A lot of my work has been done in the penal systems. I've had classes where I taught and actually had interaction with some of the most intelligent people ever. And I know what you're saying, they got a long time to do homework. I get it. I get it. I get it. But if I may, just extending the conversation, for me, this is where it starts. It starts with the mindset. How are we thinking about these issues? How are we thinking about ourselves? How are we thinking about the responsibility that we have? And it's not easy. It's not easy. And most often when I'm having my workshops, I ask folks about self-reflection and self-awareness. How many of us have taken time to tap into ourselves and know what makes us happy? And really write it out. What makes us sad? What makes us afraid? Why does that make you happy or afraid? And when you can make your day much more simplistic than the clock and a schedule, you can connect to much more grounded versions of why we have the outcomes that we do. I don't think that what I'm doing or what my firm is doing or what the philosophical approach about being a messenger is rocket science. That is not what I'm here saying. I'm taking some very basic opportunities and conversations to make this simple, to make it very simple. How do our kids go to school every day and end up in handcuffs? Simple. Yeah, there's a lot of things that happens, I get, but simple. As messengers, what conversations are we having? Are we just checking the box and pushing our clients, those of us that teach in higher ed, our students, are we pushing them out the door? Are we actually using some fierce conversations and listening to their concerns and issues and using our skill sets as messengers to give them a different opportunity than what they think they can? That's what the Institute is about. The Institute that we're starting is an assets-based institute. There will be no derogatory language from the students, any of my facilitators, or anyone that walks in the room. And what I mean by derogatory language is the systemic language that seeps into the psyche of doubt, right? Poor, bad student, juvenile delinquent, the one that I hate the most, at risk. You won't be able to use them. Why? Those kids live that every day. They say it to each other. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's been repeated in school systems. It's been repeated in the community center. It's been repeated by mommy and daddy. I'm gonna say it again. It's been repeated by mommy and daddy. And if you can think about the historical pain, to me it makes sense. Because that's what my mama told me. At 14 years old, boy, I hear, quote, boy, I hear you talk about going to college. If you're going, you better get, what's that thing they call? Better get a scholarship because we don't have any money. No insight about financial aid, nothing about grants. And I mean, at this point, I'm rocking out in school. It's before that other puberty word hits you and you start thinking to somebody because you scored a touchdown on Friday night. Before that happened to me, I had like a 4.3 GPA. And I actually felt I was deserving of something because in my mind, I was keeping the other things out of her life. Because my responsibility as a kid was to make her proud. That was it. How do you make her proud? Don't be a problem child. It was really that simple in my house. Just don't be what everybody else is being and cause trouble. Messengers. Got my work ethic. I got my value systems from the same woman that told me that you should go get a job after high school. The same person that laid down in a cotton field gave me the work ethic and the courage to stand up in front of people and share those stories combined with formal education stories with hope that we change the way we think about each other. We use an assets-based approach. We're not going to talk about the crack fiend mama in a negative way. We're going to pull the good from these kids. Some of our best artists, the music, the blues, the jazz, the country, it comes from pain. While our kids are often alienated for the things we've seen others become stars in. Who was the messenger that told Coltrane? That was a messenger. We love to talk about a meritocracy, but man, do you know how that is to fight the world and think of yourself as being great every day? Where the constructs or the structures that we have in place are telling you not to love yourself. Indirectly or directly, y'all, that is not easy. And I'm pretty sure you have some of them sitting in front of you in your offices at time. But I think as adults, as the news reporter asked me, so you think the responsibility of educating kids is on the adults, not the kids? What? No, I don't know. Was it 14? How many of you at the age of 14 without any guardianship when you got suspended? Don't say suspended, but got suspended. How many of you did the homework that the teacher sent home with you? Oh my God, we forget about life and maturity and human development. Sometimes don't we? We don't need to use all that formal education for everything. Sometimes kids are just kids. And I'm a proud father. You know one of the best things I get the opportunity to do? I get to help guide her decisions. Guide them. Not dictate them. Guide them. I know when she needs me to step in to just listen. I know when it's time to empower her to say, you are an intelligent person, with hopes that that mistake that she makes because that boy never should have been in our relationship isn't a lifelong issue. But as soon as you start painting a picture about him not being worthy of your time, I'm sorry, I do a lot of gender work, but guess what? She's gonna find a way to see him because there's something about him that has her attention. I was that boy. I was that boy. I had to stand across the street from my high school girlfriend because I wasn't in the Jack and Jill program. My parents were not meeting with them to play the high social functions in the neighborhood. 15 years old. Stand across the street now, man. You can't come in my yard. I don't know why I was dating her, but we know why I was dating her. That puberty thing was going crazy. But accepted that. That's just one relationship. Can you imagine those barriers that we're talking about and the mindset you must have to overcome those and believe, right? Because I had school teachers that told me, boy, you need to leave that fast girl alone, go somewhere and sit down. You can't say that these days, right? You can't say those conversations. I said I got bused when I was 9 years old. It was because my mother filled out the paperwork for me to be tested for gifted programs. Guess who did it? It was that school teacher that looked at me and said, oh my God, there's a lot going on at home and you are not gonna share it with you, are you? I even lied when she asked me, did your parents see the letter that came home about you being tested? No, man, we didn't get a letter. When she's working 2 jobs and there's no father in the home, when she tells you every morning before you get on that school bus, baby, don't tell nobody. And she's wiping these off, right? Don't you tell nobody what happens at home. That's real. That's real. So my loyalty to her and protecting our secrets, you internalize it, and that pain comes out one way or another. And those messages along my journey, they saw it. They didn't put me out because I answered the question before I raised my hand based on the rules. They said, there's something about this boy. If we can catch him early enough, he might be a productive citizen and add to the conversation. I'm sorry, I love me, but I go into a lot of spaces where I see a lot of that in our kids. And if we could just grab her right now, give her some hope, give her some affirmation, and not always talk about the things that we know are present that are derogatory in her life. As messengers, that's my job. That's my job as a person that's been given so much to come from where I came from, but also get to another space and not forget who I am. I wouldn't change it for the world. I need us. I need you. I need you looking back, talking, and thinking about what Mother gave you as value systems and challenging them, right? Because some of the things my mother gave me about populations and institutions and agencies that I wasn't supposed to be in wasn't true. It wasn't true. Some of those kids are walking in with the same thing. When the parents are calling and they're cursing out the guidance counselors, they're forgetting that the kid has to go back to school, and that negative conversation. I just can't wait till you get out the 7th grade, because I'm sick of this school stuff. That happens every day, because that mother has been also alienated from a positive experience when they went in the 7th grade with the same school. Oops, should have changed. How? If you didn't do well in school, low educational attainment, unemployment, poverty, crime. It sounds good to just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and change it. And I'm awfully very cautious about who I am and sharing so much, because certain populations, right? Well, do it like Chad did it. Do it like he did it. That's why that difference comes in, right? Because if you appreciate it, then you say, oh, it's not the same. I'm the only one from my neighborhood that made it through college. How many of us went? A lot. You can throw that ball, shoot the ball, they give you a shot these days. That wasn't enough for them to get up every morning to be at the 8 o'clock class. That wasn't enough for them to actually read the book and write the essay on it. They brought those same structural issues with them, and I'm not excusing accountability, and ended up back home, back in those unemployment, low educational attainment environments. 70% of those clients as a bail bondsman were those same guys that we used to sit in the car with and said, we ain't gonna be nothing like our daddies when we grow up. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna buy our mamas a house. Y'all know what I'm saying, we mama's boys. No matter what, we're gonna take care of mama. We used to sit back there just like bond together off what? Off deficits. Off pain. You're not the only one. I just gave you the example of music, what that does to us. But for some reason, we forget about that with our young boys and girls. So when I'm saying this, it's about us challenging ourselves as messengers to start thinking differently about these populations. How do we think differently about it? Do not make excuses and get rid of accountability. The first thing I did when I joined NASA, Delaware Space Grant, first thing they say, no, we'll use law enforcement. So I'm working with recruitment, retention, and hiring. What do you think the first thing law enforcement officers always say when you bring in, we need to diversify the pool? But Dr. Stark, we don't want to lower our standards. Yes, ma'am. That's the first thing, unconsciously. And I actually stop and I actually hold my hands up when they do that, because I really want to give them a hug. Because I, at that point, have some empathy about the privilege and entitlement of being a cop that they have bought into. Sometimes it's not their fault. We got bad systems with good people. We got bad systems with good people. I'm sorry, I don't give up that easy. I stand in these spaces where I'm not supposed to be, right? But I believe in them. I believe that if we work on this and we work on that ethic of care, and we take our responsibility as messengers in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our churches, I think this thing could look so much different. So much different. What are we waiting on? My brother used to always call me and aggravate me about changing hearts. Because these conversations don't always go that well. Last week I was in a meeting. I'm a part of an international organization. 7:30 I go to the meeting. And we have a new regime, new president. Brings up his board. He says great things about the board members. And there are 8 men and 1 female. What do you think I'm thinking? Can we please acknowledge that we need to work on diversifying our board? Can we just say that? No. 1 female is African American. He's talking about skill sets and how much they are dedicated to the organization. And he, quote, As most of you all know, I grew up on a tobacco farm in North Carolina. And I mean, there were some hard-working people on the tobacco farm. And then he turns, and I'm not gonna say her name, but he says, but if she would have been on a tobacco farm, she would have outworked them all. He took a black woman in Central Virginia, North Carolina, tobacco farm. Why you just didn't call her your bed witch? Shirley Chisholm, you couldn't. Michelle Obama, you couldn't. You couldn't talk about her intellectual prowess as an example for how good her commitment is being received to a service organization. You had to make her into a slave. What do you do, Chad? You sitting in this room, working with these folks. We going to Guatemala to do water projects. You can't let this go. You got a responsibility as. You may risk the relationships. You may risk the proposal that you just put into BWXT, which is a $2 billion company that produces the nuclear fuel for NASA. Because that's where you met the CEO. Oh, man. Man, I wanted to get back to being that rental property owner. I owe it. I'm not exactly sure if the young lady realized it as well, because she had this biggest smile on her face. And I had to step outside because the tear came. Because it's unconscious when the person delivering the discriminatory comment. But I think it's sad when the person that the comment was about doesn't even realize that they've been insulted. And that's what post-racial will do for you. Oh no, I'm here, I'm in the room, I'm glad, I appreciate it. It doesn't stop the unconscious way that we're thinking about each other, because we're not supposed to acknowledge race. And there's no way, if he understood the history of this land, this nation, Virginia and North Carolina, and he sees this woman up here, there's no way that that young man would have allowed himself to connect those two. And she has the job of a secretary and the president-elect. None of the men are doing half of the work. I started asking where the babies were. It's 2017 and we still having to explain equity, not equality. How we doing on time? I know I can talk. About 10 minutes. Okay, so in doing this, here's what we do in my firm. We talk about 4 constructs. I'm not going to beat it up a whole lot, but I did want to share with you what you have before you hear. I talk about identity, and I'm going to assume that you can see that I define identity a little different than what most would. And I talk about a perceptual lens of looking through life. So when we're talking to our kids in the 14 to 18-year group, what do you think the first session is going to be about? Oh, baby, you gotta love yourself. Everything that's happened in this country and building the first penitentiary the Quakers did in Pennsylvania in the early 19th century, they didn't know you was coming. It ain't your fault. They've been locking people up way before you home. But that ain't what they're gonna tell you. They're gonna tell you the worst thing since sliced bread. I ain't never had no kid like you before. You the first student I ever had in my class that talked to me that way. Nope. Because not only do you have to know your identity, you got to understand the perceptual identity that society has about you. It's my responsibility as a messenger to hurt their feelings and build them back up and tell them that maybe everyone doesn't think that you can be a productive citizen. I have to stand before them and tell them that in order to educate them about why these conversations are being had about you. I got to tell them about people like me with a PhD in criminology that can actually go write a grant for $4 or $5 million to come into your home neighborhood and write about you to advance my career. Never come back with an action plan to change those structural conditions of why the government thought it was important enough to allow me to apply for the funds, let alone get them. My career has been made off the backs of the same people that I've been talking about every day, and I was even one of those people. I'm going to tell them that I did that. They deserve to know exactly how we framed impoverished communities. We are the bevy of grant writing. How many times do you want to go to the suburbs and talk about crime? Oh, NIJ don't pony up $2-3 million for that. They deserve to know these conversations so they can see themselves through a different identity and a different lens. Now you can empower them. Hey, you know, if you go get this legitimacy, right, you can come write about your own neighborhood. You can tell a story about being a bail bonds when they're growing up and changing the way you think about the population and knowing that you perpetuate the same discrimination as that system. I was a part of a bad system. You can tell them that you don't have to accept it. But there's some steps along the way that are gonna be tough. But if you trust in it enough, we can get you there. Culture. What a better opportunity to show them something totally different than the same community center that they've been going to each and every day. We're gonna move them around. We're gonna meet twice a month. In class, gonna be a formal education session. 2 weeks later, we're adding a cultural experience and event to match that in-class education. Why? Kids need to touch something. They need to see it on their faces, they need to see it on their backs, they need to be able to apply it. So we're gonna expose them to so many different cultures that they aren't gonna know that they don't deserve to be in among. Diversity is a word that, of course, I say is a cuss word because we love to check boxes on gender and race. That's so insulting to the intellectual people we have in this room, as well as in society. We do different ways of thinking. We want inclusion, different ways of being, different ways of knowing. And if you have those, guess what will fall out? Race and gender and class. Different ways of being, different ways of thinking, different ways of knowing. It'll fall out on its own. But you gotta be a consistent messenger to those ideas. It has to. And the last one is respect. So that's where we're gonna have our job training, our job readiness skills. They're gonna earn this, right? I've secured a barber shop. I have, I should charge them if I advertise where I get my clothes from now. But the place where I go in Lynchburg, they're gonna do ties and they're gonna supply me with the outfits so that my men will be dressed as they should be dressed in this society for professional identity, and they're gonna go on interviews. I'm working on the clothing store for my ladies and the beauty salon just to wash and set. No chemicals, I get it, liability, because the jobs for the education, the employment starts as soon as they get out of school. We have jobs from Public Works, we have jobs from Parks and Rec, we have jobs from Water Resources, we have jobs from libraries and museums. I am proud to say 2 weeks ago, I met with the organization Humankind. They have 3 jobs as lifeguards, so these kids are gonna be certified lifeguards by being in the program as well. I so appreciate it. Just met with Genworth, who's about to be bought out by another company. Just got a phone call or a text on the way up here. They wanna meet with me to see if they can be a corporate sponsor. I'm telling you, people care. BWXT wants to come on and do it. They won't change. What happens? The messengers are what happened. We stopped being messengers. I wouldn't have known that they was interested if I wouldn't have spent the last 2 years trying to get the city to take the responsibility and offer up the resources. But when that happens, people's ears, they come open. That ethic of care becomes easier. Oh, if they're doing it, then it must be okay. But I need my messengers to be willing to get tomatoes thrown at us sometimes, to be willing to get called crazy, to be willing to sometimes risk some financial security. As I was thinking about my grandfather and the risks he's taken, I don't think I'm asking anything too far-fetched, as we understand. the history and who has stood in front of water hoses, who has been beaten down and deaths have been taken. We've forgotten what others have sacrificed, and there was way more unity standing in those front lines with a facial and racial expressions wasn't the same. People have been pulling up from different ethnicities and races to fight against injustice for us for so long. But we don't get to tell that to a lot of the conservative identities do. They only think that Black Lives Matter is for Black people to advocate. That's on us as messengers, folks. We gotta teach. We gotta bring awareness, and you can't be afraid of what society identifies as truths. You gotta dig to that ethical care and know you're doing the right thing and put it on the line and say it's gonna come back if you believe in it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I can't express to you how grateful it is for me to be in this point in my life, to be invited, like I said before, but to be able to have meaningful conversations with those that I know will become messengers for life. Thank you.